Don't answer that, Wang Minhee murmured, her scarlet nails tracing the dragon tattoo that coiled across Min Chan's shoulder. Blood still spattered his knuckles from the territorial war he'd just won, his phone vibrating insistently against the polished surface of his private booth in the underground casino. Amelia Reed's name illuminated the screen for the third time that night. Min Chan silenced it without hesitation. My wife knows better than to call during a victory celebration, he said, pulling Minhee closer as smoke from imported cigars clouded the air around them. The casino floor below pulsed with neon lights, red, gold, violet, each one representing a district of Seoul that now bowed to the Dragon Syndicate. The phone buzzed once more with a voicemail notification. Min Chan flipped it face down on the table next to his Glock. She never calls this late, Minhee whispered, her fingers pausing at his collar. Because she knows I'm always working, Min Chan replied, his hand finding the small of her back. That's why I control the entire underworld and have a marriage that exists only for appearances. 20 hours later, those same hands that had caressed his mistress were now trembling as Min Chan crashed through the doors of a remote coastal hospice. His designer suit jacket torn, his knuckles reopened and bleeding from beating answers out of his own men. The doctor's words cut through him like a blade to the gut. Stage 4. Metastasized throughout her lymph nodes. She's been fighting this alone for 6 months. There's nothing more we can do. Amelia lay unconscious in the narrow hospital bed, her once vibrant frame now skeletal against the white sheets. Min Chan collapsed into the chair beside her, his criminal empire suddenly meaningless. I finally listened to your message, he whispered, tears carving paths through the blood still dried on his face, the first tears he'd shed since burying his father in a rival's shallow grave 15 years ago. Why didn't you tell me in person? Amelia's eyes fluttered open briefly, her voice barely audible above the machines keeping her alive. I tried for months, Min Chan. You never had time. Welcome back to Dora's Romance Stories. Before we dive into this tale of power, betrayal, and devastating regret, comment down below where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join our storytelling family. What would you do if you discovered the most important call of your life was the one you deliberately ignored? How many moments have we all missed while chasing the wrong dreams? The Dragon Palace stood 5 stories deep beneath Seoul's Gangnam district, a monument to Min Chan's brutal rise and ruthless strategic mind. But that empire was built on a foundation of blood money, broken loyalty, and promises long forgotten. Amelia Reed stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of their penthouse apartment, 17 floors above the casino entrance. Her silk robe provided little warmth against the chill that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was nearly 2 a.m., and Min Chan still hadn't come home. 8 years. 8 years of marriage that had begun with passionate defiance against her family and slowly dissolved into 2 strangers sharing an address. One who saved lives as a trauma nurse, the other who took them without hesitation. Amelia pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the pain that had been growing there for months. Pain she had ignored until yesterday's doctor's appointment made ignoring it impossible. Miss Reed, I need to be candid with you, Dr. Song had said, her expression grave as she reviewed the scan results. The cancer is aggressive. It's spread to multiple organs. Without immediate chemotherapy and possibly surgery, your prognosis is... She had paused, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. You have months, not years. Amelia had nodded, a bitter smile nearly escaping her lips. Months, not years. In her marriage to Min Chan, time was the only currency that mattered, and he had made it abundantly clear that his time was too valuable to waste on her. Is there someone who can support you through this? Dr. Song had asked. Your husband, perhaps? Family nearby? My husband runs a very demanding business, Amelia had replied, the practiced smile she'd perfected over 8 years sliding into place. But I'll make sure he knows. That had been yesterday. Amelia had tried to tell Min Chan 3 times since the appointment. Each time he had been on a call with his lieutenants, counting blood money with his accountants, or strategizing territory expansion, with Wang Minhee, his right-hand enforcer, who seemed to occupy more of his time and attention than his own wife. The first attempt had been at breakfast. Min Chan had been cleaning his guns, cigarette burning in the ashtray beside him. "Min-chan, I need to talk to you about something important," she'd said, sliding into the chair across from him. He'd glanced up briefly, checking the clip mechanism. "Can it wait? The Incheon crew is challenging our port access in 3 hours and I need to prepare the response." The second attempt had been a text message. "We need to talk. It's urgent." His response had come 8 hours later, delivered by one of his subordinates. "In meetings all night. Tomorrow." The third attempt had been a dinner reservation at the small noodle shop where he'd first confessed his feelings 8 years ago, before the violence consumed everything. Min-chan had sent Mun-hee to cancel 2 hours before. "Boss is handling a territorial dispute," Mun-hee had explained when she called, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "He'll make it up to you." Amelia had stopped feeling jealousy years ago. Jealousy required hope, and hope had died slowly over the years, suffocated by gunfire and indifference. The sound of the private elevator made her turn. Min-chan stepped into their home at 2:47 a.m., his tailored black suit still immaculate despite the violence of the evening. At 38, he was everything the underground whispered about: ruthless, calculating, untouchable. Scars traced his jawline, tattoos crawled up his neck, and his eyes held the cold steel of a man who had killed before he turned 20. He had built the Dragon Syndicate from his father's small gambling operation into a criminal empire that controlled half of Seoul's underground, and it showed in every confident, dangerous step he took. Wang Mun-hee followed him in, her stilettos clicking on the marble floor. She carried a leather briefcase and was discussing tomorrow's weapons shipment, her voice low and intimate in a way that made Amelia feel like an intruder in her own home. "The Busan suppliers dock at dawn," Mun-hee was saying, scrolling through encrypted messages on her phone. "The Yakuza expect a 20% cut for safe passage through their waters." "Make it 15%, Min-chan replied, loosening his tie but not removing it. "I want them to know we're not coming to the table weak." Neither acknowledged Amelia standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, her presence a ghost in the penthouse they all occupied. "Min-chan," Amelia said softly. "Can we talk, please?" He glanced at her as if noticing her presence for the first time. "The shipment inventory needs verification tonight. The Yakuza don't wait. It's important." Amelia tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "So is this. Everything is important, Amelia. That's how survival works in my world." He moved past her toward his private office, Mun-hee trailing behind with her ever-present briefcase and perfectly calculated smile that never quite reached her eyes. "It's about my health," Amelia said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Min-chan paused mid-step, turning slowly. "Your health? What about it?" Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks. Not like this. She hadn't wanted to tell him like this with his enforcer standing there, with him halfway to another meeting, another war, another place where Amelia couldn't follow. "I have cancer," she said, her hand moving to her chest where the pain lived. "It's advanced. Stage 4. For a moment, something flashed across Min-chan's face. Surprise, confusion, perhaps even fear, but it vanished so quickly. Amelia wondered if she'd imagined it. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice oddly detached, the same tone he used when interrogating rivals. "I got the diagnosis yesterday." "Yesterday? And you're only telling me now?" Amelia felt a spark of anger ignite in her chest. "I've been trying to tell you since yesterday, Min-chan. You never have time." Min-chan checked the Rolex on his wrist, a watch purchased with protection money. "We'll discuss this tomorrow. I have the Yakuza waiting on confirmation. The doctor says it's terminal." Amelia pressed on, her voice breaking. "I need treatment. I need you." Min-chan nodded curtly, his face hardening into the mask she'd seen him wear 1,000 times. "I'll have Mun-hee arrange for the best oncologists. We'll get you whatever medical support you need. Money isn't an issue." He paused. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have a shipment to verify." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into his office with Mun-hee, the door closing behind them with a soft, definitive click. Amelia stood there, invisible once again. She had become a beautiful relic in this museum of violence and power, something to be maintained but never truly seen. Have you ever felt like you were drowning while the person who promised to protect you counted money instead? Have you ever realized that the life you built with someone exists only in your memory, while they've moved on without ever leaving? The penthouse had 12 rooms, yet Amelia felt she couldn't breathe in any of them. She walked slowly to their bedroom suite, the one they no longer shared. Min-chan slept in his office most nights, or claimed to. Amelia had stopped asking where he really was after catching him and Mun-hee in an intimate conversation 4 months ago. Her hand on his chest, his fingers brushing her hair from her face. "She's just my enforcer," Min-chan had explained dismissively. "Don't be dramatic." In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection. 32 years old, dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders, eyes that once sparkled with purpose and compassion. She barely recognized herself anymore. The trauma nurse who had once saved lives in emergency rooms before giving it all up for love. For him, she remembered the first time they met. Min-chan stumbling into her ER with a knife wound, refusing anesthesia, his eyes alive with something she'd mistaken for vulnerability. "You have gentle hands," he'd said through gritted teeth as she stitched him up. It's a rare gift to touch someone with violence and make it feel like care. What Amelia hadn't realized then was that Min-chan approached everything as a weapon to be sharpened, a weakness to be exploited. He'd been analyzing her compassion, not feeling it. That distinction had taken years to understand. Her phone sat on the counter, and she picked it up with trembling hands. She had composed these words 100 times in her mind. Now she needed to say them aloud, even if he wouldn't listen in person. Amelia pressed record and began to speak, tears streaming down her face. "Min-chan, it's me. I know you're busy, you're always busy, but I need to tell you something important. I've been carrying this diagnosis alone since yesterday. I have terminal cancer. The doctor says without aggressive treatment, I have months, not years. But even with treatment, the prognosis isn't good." Her voice broke, but she continued. "I can't remember the last time you looked at me like I mattered. Like I was more than just another obligation you inherited when you took over the syndicate. I thought when we married that our love was strong enough to survive your world. We were so happy once, weren't we? 8 years ago, I believed that what we had was special enough to weather any storm. But 8 years later, I'm still waiting for the man I fell in love with to return, and I can't wait anymore. Not with the time I have left." Amelia took a deep breath, memories flooding back. Min-chan teaching her to shoot in case his enemies came for her. Min-chan surprising her with midnight drives along the coast. Min-chan holding her through panic attacks after particularly violent nights. Where had that man gone? "So I'm leaving for the coastal hospice in Gangwon province. By the time you hear this, if you ever do, I'll already be gone. I want to spend whatever time I have left where I can hear the ocean, and where I don't have to pretend the blood on your hands doesn't stain everything we touch. I'm taking the photo album from our wedding. I want to remember who you were before the Dragon Syndicate consumed the man I loved." She wiped her eyes. "Don't look for me, Min-chan. Not because I hate you, but because I need to find myself again. I need to remember what it feels like to matter to someone, to be more than just a weakness someone could exploit to hurt you. I loved you. I really did. I loved you enough to wait 8 years, hoping you'd love me back. But I don't have 8 more years. I don't even have 1. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Goodbye, my dragon. I hope you find peace in your empire of ashes." She hit send before she could change her mind. The message uploaded as a voice note to Min-chan's phone. The timestamp read 3:15 a.m. 5 floors below in his private office, Min-chan sat with Mun-hee reviewing shipment manifests. His phone buzzed on the desk. He saw Amelia's name flash on the screen, then another notification from his Incheon lieutenant layered over it. Without thinking, he swiped away all notifications. He didn't have time for whatever Amelia wanted to discuss. It could wait until morning. As Mun-hee leaned closer to point out a discrepancy in the weapon counts, her perfume enveloped him gunpowder and jasmine. Her hand brushed his, lingering a moment too long. Min-chan looked up at her, the tension between them palpable, dangerous. "We should finish the inventory," she whispered, but made no move to return to her seat. Min-chan knew he should stop what was about to happen. He thought fleetingly of Amelia upstairs, of the diagnosis she had shared. But those thoughts seemed distant, unreal compared to the immediate presence of Moon-hee, who understood his world, who spoke his language of violence and power moves, who never asked him to be anything other than what he was. "The inventory can wait," Min-chan said, reaching for her. Earlier that evening, the two of them had stood in front of Amelia as she revealed her terminal diagnosis. Now, in the shadowy confines of his office, they crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, their betrayal complete. Upstairs, unaware, Amelia packed a single duffel bag. Not the designer clothes Min-chan bought her to wear to syndicate gatherings, but simple things, jeans, sweaters, the nursing scrubs she'd kept hidden in the back of her closet like a secret identity. She had been saving money for 2 years, small amounts from the household account that she had quietly moved into a separate fund. Money laundered so many times it was clean. Enough to disappear, enough to die with dignity. She placed her wedding ring on the nightstand beside a framed photo from their wedding day. They had looked so dangerously happy then, so full of reckless promise. Min-chan smiling down at her as if she were the only person in the world worth protecting. When had that gaze turned cold? At 4:22 a.m., the penthouse was silent. Min-chan was still in his office, Moon-hee having finally left an hour earlier, adjusting her clothing as she stepped into the elevator. Amelia walked down the hallway one last time, pausing outside his door. She could hear him on an encrypted call, his voice sharp and lethal, commanding foot soldiers across the city. "The projected territory expansion exceeds our initial estimates by 3 districts, Min-chan was saying. "I want us aggressive on this. Double our presence in Itaewon." For a moment, her hand hovered over the door handle. Should she try one more time? One final attempt to make him see her, hear her, choose her? Amelia lowered her hand. He wouldn't hear her now. He never had. She didn't say goodbye in person. She knew if she saw his face, those cold, beautiful eyes, she might lose her courage. The service elevator took her down to the underground garage where a taxi waited, engine running quietly. She had arranged everything carefully, making sure no one would know she was leaving until it was too late to stop her. As the car pulled away from the building that had been her prison disguised as protection, Amelia didn't look back. She had finally learned what Min-chan had always known. Sometimes the only way to survive is to disappear before the violence catches up to you. The Dragon Syndicate's most valuable treasure had just walked out the door, and the dragon didn't even notice she was gone. The Dragon Palace's VIP lounge reeked of expensive whiskey and gunpowder. Min-chan raised his glass as his lieutenants roared their approval, the crystal tumbler catching the neon lights that pulsed through the underground casino like a heartbeat. 3 districts. He'd claimed 3 entire districts in a single night, and the bodies of the Iron Fist Triad's leadership were still cooling in a warehouse by the Han River. "To the dragon!" Wang Moon-hee's voice cut through the chaos, her scarlet dress clinging to her curves as she moved through the crowd of tattooed enforcers and stone-faced killers. She poured aged scotch into Min-chan's glass, her fingers lingering against his as she handed it back. "Seoul bows to you now, boss. The entire Southern Territory is ours." Min-chan downed the whiskey in one swallow, feeling the burn chase away the adrenaline that still thrummed through his veins. Blood spattered his shirt, cuffs not his own. Never his own. The violence had been surgical, precise, exactly as he'd planned it. Park Min-chan didn't leave loose ends. His phone vibrated on the leather booth beside his Glock. Amelia Reed's name illuminated the screen. Her photo from their wedding day smiling up at him back when she still looked at him like he was her hero instead of her warden. "Don't," Moon-hee murmured, sliding into the booth beside him. Her hand covered his phone, fingers splayed across his wife's face. "Not tonight. Tonight is about victory." Min-chan hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Amelia never called this late. She knew better. She understood the rules of his world. You don't interrupt the dragon when he's feeding. "She's probably nagging about some charity event," Moon-hee continued, her voice honeyed with false sympathy. She leaned closer, her lips near his ear. "You've given her everything, Min-chan. A penthouse, security, more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. What more could she possibly want?" The phone stopped vibrating. One missed call. Around them, His men celebrated with prostitutes and gambling chips, their loyalty purchased with the blood he'd spilled tonight. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the promise of power. This was his kingdom, built from nothing but his father's gambling debts and his own ruthless ambition. Every scar on his body was a lesson learned. Every tattoo was a territory claimed. The phone buzzed again. Amelia's name. Again. Munhee's hand slid to his thigh, her nails dragging against the fabric of his pants. She doesn't understand you like I do. She doesn't understand what it takes to build an empire. Her other hand reached across him, fingers dancing over his phone screen. Let me handle this. Before Minchan could respond, Munhee swiped away the notification with practiced ease. Then another. She held down the power button until the screen went dark completely. There, she whispered, her lips curving into a smile as she tucked the phone into his jacket pocket, her hand lingering over his heart. Now nothing can ruin your victory. You've earned this celebration, boss. Your wife can wait until morning. After all, she poured him another drink, her eyes locked on his. Isn't that what wives are supposed to do? Wait? Minchan accepted the glass, watching his men toast to his name. Munhee was right. Amelia could wait. She always did. He didn't know that 17 floors above him, his wife was packing a bag with trembling hands, her wedding ring already abandoned on their nightstand. Amelia's hands shook as she held the phone to her lips, the bathroom mirror reflecting a woman she barely recognized. The pain in her chest had spread to her bones now, a constant reminder that time was a luxury she no longer possessed. She pressed record. Minchan, it's me. Her voice cracked immediately, tears already streaming down her face. I know you're busy celebrating. You're always busy, always building, always conquering. But I need you to hear this, even if you never listen. She paused, struggling to breathe through the weight, crushing her lungs, the cancer, the grief, the 8 years of slowly disappearing. I got the diagnosis 2 days ago. Terminal cancer, stage 4. The doctor says I have months without treatment, maybe a year with it. But I can't do this anymore, Minchan. I can't fight this disease while fighting for scraps of your attention. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I've been trying to tell you, but you never have time. You had time to plan 3 territorial wars this month, time to count money with Munhee until dawn, but not 5 minutes to hear that your wife is dying. Her voice hardened, anger finally surfacing through the sorrow. I'm leaving tonight. By the time you hear this, I'll already be gone. I'm going to the coastal hospice in Gangwon province where I can die with dignity instead of invisibility. I'm taking the photo from our wedding, the one where you still looked at me like I mattered. I want to remember who you were before the Dragon Syndicate devoured the man I loved. She took a shuddering breath. Don't look for me. I need to find myself again before I disappear completely. I loved you, Minchan. I loved you enough to become a ghost in my own home. But I don't have enough time left to keep waiting for you to love me back. Goodbye, my dragon. I hope your empire keeps you warm. She hit send, watching the voice note upload with a finality that made her chest tighten. 3:15 a.m. He'd see it eventually. Maybe. Moving mechanically, Amelia pulled a worn duffel bag from the closet, not the designer luggage Minchan had bought her, but the canvas bag from her nursing school days. She packed her old scrubs, faded jeans, the simple cotton dresses she'd hidden away. No jewelry, no expensive gifts, just the things that still felt like her. From the drawer, she retrieved a single photograph, its edges worn from being held too many times. Minchan, at 29, before the scars multiplied, before his eyes turned to ice. He was smiling at her like she was his entire world, not just another asset to protect. The apartment was silent except for her footsteps as she walked to Minchan's office. His gun safe dominated one corner, matte black steel that required his fingerprint to open. She stared at it for a long moment, this monument to his violence, this altar to his power. Amelia pulled off her wedding ring, the platinum band that had once symbolized forever. She placed it carefully on top of the safe, watching it catch the dim light, a treasure abandoned on a tomb. She didn't leave a note. The ring said everything she couldn't. Minchan stumbled through the penthouse door at 6:47 a.m. his shirt untucked, lipstick smudged across his collar. The celebration had stretched into dawn, whiskey and adrenaline blurring the hours into a haze of victory toasts and Munhee's hands on his skin. His head pounded, but it was the good kind of pain, the kind that came from winning. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Usually Amelia would be awake by now, moving quietly through the kitchen, preparing tea she knew he'd never drink. She'd learned years ago not to ask where he'd been, not to comment on the blood or the perfume that wasn't hers. She'd learned to be invisible, which was exactly what he'd needed her to be. "Amelia?" His voice echoed off the marble floors, swallowed by emptiness. No response. Minchan moved through the living room, his instincts honed by 15 years of survival in Seoul's underworld, screaming that something was wrong. The air felt different, stale, abandoned, the kind of stillness that preceded an ambush. He checked the bedroom first. The bed was made with military precision, untouched. Her slippers were gone from their usual place by the nightstand. The bathroom held no trace of her, no toothbrush, no medications, no evidence she'd ever existed there at all. His heart began to race, a sensation he hadn't felt since the night his father was executed by the Iron Fist Triad. Fear. Actual fear. Minchan pulled his gun from his waistband, checking corners like he was clearing a hostile location. Kitchen empty, guest rooms untouched, her closet half bare. Only the expensive dresses he'd bought for syndicate events remained, hanging like abandoned costumes. Where the fuck was she? He burst into his office, ready to check the security cameras, ready to mobilize every soldier in his command to find her. His eyes swept the room and stopped dead on the gun safe. Platinum gleamed against matte black steel, her wedding ring. Minchan crossed the room in 3 strides, snatching the ring from the safe like it might disappear. The metal was cold in his palm, accusatory. He stared at it, his mind racing through possibilities. Kidnapping, but there were no signs of struggle. Ransom, but no one had called. Betrayal, but Amelia didn't have it in her to betray anyone, least of all him. The silence pressed against his eardrums like water pressure, drowning him. This wasn't the silence of an empty apartment. This was the silence of abandonment, of finality. His phone. Where was his fucking phone? Minchan patted his pockets frantically, finding it in his jacket. The screen was black, dead. When had Munhee turned it off? He jabbed the power button, waiting an eternity for it to boot up. Notifications flooded the screen. 3 missed calls from Amelia between 2 and 3 a.m. 1 voice message. Timestamp, 3:15 a.m. His thumb hovered over the play button, and for the first time since he'd killed his first man at 19, Park Minchan's hands trembled. He pressed play. Amelia's voice filled the office, and with every word, his empire of blood and steel began to crumble. Minchan's finger trembled as he pressed play. The wedding ring still clutched in his other hand like a talisman that had lost its power. "Minchan, it's me." Amelia's voice cracked through the speaker, and something in his chest cracked with it. He'd heard men beg for their lives, heard rivals scream as they died, but nothing had ever sounded like this raw, broken defeat. "I know you're busy celebrating. You're always busy, always building, always conquering, but I need you to hear this, even if you never listen." He sank into his desk chair, the gun still in his waistband pressing against his spine. Outside the window, Seoul was waking up his soul, the city he'd conquered district by district. But her words were stripping away everything he'd built, revealing the rot beneath. "I got the diagnosis 2 days ago. Terminal cancer. Stage 4. The words hit him like bullets. Terminal. Cancer. Stage 4. 2 days ago. 2 fucking days, and he hadn't known, hadn't noticed, hadn't cared enough to see past his own ambition. "The doctor says I have months without treatment. Maybe a year with it. But I can't do this anymore, Minchan. I can't fight this disease while fighting for scraps of your attention." His jaw clenched so hard he tasted blood where his teeth cut into his cheek. He remembered now her standing in the living room, trying to tell him something. "It's about my health." And what had he said? "We'll discuss this tomorrow." He dismissed her like she was one of his street soldiers, someone whose problems could wait while he built his empire. "I've been trying to tell you, but you never have time. You had time to plan 3 territorial wars this month, time to count money with Moon-hee until dawn, but not 5 minutes to hear that your wife is dying. Moon-hee. The name detonated in his mind like a grenade. His phone, Moon-hee had turned it off. Amelia's calls, Moon-hee had swiped them away. She's probably nagging. His enforcer's voice echoed in his memory, and rage began to build in his gut like a nuclear reaction. I'm leaving tonight. By the time you hear this, I'll already be gone. No, 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 no. Don't look for me. I need to find myself again before I disappear completely. I loved you, Min-chan. I loved you enough to become a ghost in my own home. But I don't have enough time left to keep waiting for you to love me back. The voice message ended with a soft click, and Min-chan sat in the deafening silence of his office, staring at the wedding ring in his palm. He'd built an empire on fear and violence. He'd crushed every enemy who dared challenge him. He'd turned Seoul's underworld into his personal kingdom, and while he'd been busy being a dragon, he'd let his wife die alone. Min-chan is about to realize his mistake, but it might be too late. If you believe you should never take your loved ones for granted, like this video. Comment, time is precious, if you're not siding with Min-chan's negligence. The wedding ring clattered against the desk as Min-chan stood, his face contorting with a fury that had nothing to do with territory or power. This rage was different. This rage was grief wearing a monster's face. And someone was going to pay. Min-chan found Wang Moon-hee in the Dragon Palace's counting room, surrounded by stacks of cash from last night's victory. She looked up as he entered, her smile predatory and confident. She thought she'd won something. She thought she'd secured her place at his side by eliminating the competition. She had no idea she'd just signed her own death warrant. Boss, you're back early. I thought you'd sleep until... The back of his hand caught her across the face, sending her sprawling into the counting table. Bills scattered like snow as she hit the floor, blood trickling from her split lip. His men around the room froze, hands instinctively moving toward weapons they wouldn't dare draw. You turned off my phone. Min-chan's voice was quiet, deadly calm. The kind of calm that preceded executions. Last night, in the VIP lounge, you silenced my wife's calls and told me she was nagging. Moon-hee pushed herself up on her elbows, fear finally bleeding through her calculated composure. Boss, I was just trying to protect your celebration. She was dying. The words came out like shards of glass. Terminal cancer. Stage 4. She was calling to say goodbye, and you deleted the notifications because you thought you could take her place. Understanding dawned across Moon-hee's face, followed immediately by panic. She scrambled backward, blood from her lips staining the $100 bills beneath her. Min-chan, please. I didn't know. You didn't care. He crouched down, grabbing her jaw with bruising force, making her look into his eyes. You saw my wife's name on that screen, and you decided her life was worth less than your ambition. You decided you knew better than me what I needed. His grip tightened until she whimpered. I should kill you. Slowly. Make it last days. He released her suddenly, standing. But you're not worth the bullet. You're not worth my time or my rage. You're nothing. Min-chan turned to his lieutenants who lined the walls like statues. Strip her. Rank, accounts, properties, protection. Everything she has came from this syndicate. Take it all back. Every one, every privilege, every connection. By sunset, I want Wang Moon-hee to be exactly what she was before I made the mistake of trusting her nobody. Boss, please. Moon-hee's voice cracked as 2 enforcers hauled her to her feet. Put her on the street in Itaewon. Let her explain to the rival gangs why the dragon's former right hand is suddenly unprotected. See how long her ambition keeps her warm. The enforcers dragged her toward the door, her screams echoing through the counting room. Min-chan didn't watch her go. She was already dead to him. He pulled out his phone, dialing his most trusted lieutenant. Mobilize everyone, every soldier, every informant, every contact we have in this city and beyond. I need hospital records, hospice admissions, any facility within 300 kilometers that treats terminal patients. Find my wife. Boss, what are we looking for? Amelia Reed, mid-30s, Korean-American, former trauma nurse. She left sometime between 3 and 6 this morning. Find her." Min-chan ended the call and stared at the scattered money around him, blood money that suddenly meant nothing at all. His empire had cost him everything that mattered. Now he'd burn it all down to get her back. Seoul's underworld bent to Min-chan's will like grass before a hurricane. Within 2 hours, every street-level informant, corrupt hospital administrator, and bought-off government official received the same message. Find Amelia Reed, or answer to the dragon. Min-chan stood in the back office of a private medical clinic in Gangnam, his gun pressed against the temple of Dr. Choi, a man who'd been on the syndicate's payroll for years. The doctor's hands shook as he scrolled through patient databases, sweat streaming down his face. "I'm telling you, boss, she's not in our system. We haven't admitted anyone by that name." Then check the referrals. The transfers. Terminal cancer patients seeking hospice care in the last 48 hours. Min-chan's voice was sandpaper and ice. "My wife is a trauma nurse. She'd know which facilities accept patients without family notification. Think." Dr. Choi's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up records that would have landed him in prison if anyone outside this room knew they existed. There's a coastal hospice in Gangwon Province. Sunset Haven. They specialize in end-of-life care and have a strict privacy policy. They don't report admissions to anyone, not even family members, if the patient requests confidentiality. Min-chan memorized the address before the doctor finished speaking. "If you're wrong, I'll burn this clinic to the ground with you inside." He was already moving, phone pressed to his ear as he hit the street. "Get me everything on Sunset Haven Hospice. Staff roster, security protocols, layout. I want it in my inbox before I reach the highway." His Maserati was parked illegally outside, and Min-chan slid behind the wheel, engine roaring to life like a beast awakened. The GPS showed 3 hours to Gangwon Province. He'd make it in 2. The highway blurred past at speeds that would have gotten anyone else arrested. Min-chan drove with the same reckless precision he used in firefights, calculated chaos, controlled destruction. His phone rang constantly, lieutenants reporting dead ends, informants confirming suspicions, corrupt officials trading information for continued protection. "Boss, we confirmed a Jane Doe admission at Sunset Haven 18 hours ago. Korean-American female, mid-30s, no family listed. They're not confirming identity, but the timeline matches. It's her." Min-chan cut across 3 lanes of traffic, ignoring the blaring horns. "Tell everyone to stand down. This isn't a siege. I go in alone. Boss, we should send advanced security." "I said alone." He ended the call. The city gave way to countryside, concrete towers replaced by mountains and ocean views. Min-chan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, Amelia's voice message playing on repeat in his mind. "I loved you enough to become a ghost in my own home." How many nights had he walked past her, too busy counting money and planning wars to notice she was fading? How many times had she tried to reach him while he was reaching for power instead? The Maserati's speedometer kissed 200 kilometers per hour as the coast appeared on the horizon. Sunset Haven sat on a cliff overlooking the East Sea, a modest building that looked more like a bed and breakfast than a place where people went to die. Min-chan pulled into the gravel parking lot, gravel spraying beneath his tires. He'd fought his way to the top of Seoul's underworld. Now he was about to fight for the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The hospice nurse barely had time to protest before Min-chan was past her, his eyes scanning room numbers with the same intensity he'd used to clear enemy territory. Room 7, Jane Doe. The door was partially open, afternoon sunlight streaming through sheer curtains that swayed in the ocean breeze. He pushed it open slowly, and the world stopped. Amelia sat in a chair by the window, her back to him, wrapped in a simple cotton robe that swallowed her frame. She was staring at the sea, and even from behind, Min-chan could see how much smaller she'd become. The cancer had carved her away, leaving behind someone who looked like a ghost of the woman he'd married. Amelia. Her name came out broken, barely a whisper. She turned slowly, and Min-chan felt his knees weaken. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath skin that had lost its warmth. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, eyes that had once looked at him with love and now held only resigned exhaustion. An IV stand beside her chair dripped clear fluid into her arm. "How did you find me?" Her voice was soft, defeated, not angry, just tired. "I burned half of Seoul to the ground looking for you." Min-chan took a step forward, then another, his hands shaking. The man who'd never trembled while holding a gun couldn't stop his hands from shaking now. "Amelia, You listened to the voice note." It wasn't a question. "Not until this morning. Mun-hee turned off my phone. She deleted your calls. I didn't know." The excuses died in his throat because they were exactly that. Excuses. "I should have known. I should have seen you. I should have fucking paid attention." Amelia turned back to the window, dismissing him the way he'd dismissed her 1,000 times. "You found me. Now what? You can't shoot cancer, Min-chan. You can't threaten it or buy it off. There's no territory to conquer here. Just time. And I'm running out." Min-chan crossed the room and dropped to his knees in front of her chair. The dragon of Seoul, the man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, collapsed at the feet of the woman he'd destroyed through neglect. "I'm sorry." The words came out strangled, foreign in his mouth. "I'm so fucking sorry, Amelia. You tried to tell me and I chose everything else. I chose power and money and control. And I let you die alone." Tears carved tracks down his face, the first he'd shed since burying his father. His hands reached for hers, those gentle hands that had once stitched his wounds and held his face like he was worth saving, but he stopped short, afraid to touch her, afraid she might break. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "Tell me how to fix this." Amelia finally looked down at him, and something cracked in her expression. "You can't fix it, Min-chan. That's what you never understood. Some things can't be solved with violence or money. Some things just end." Amelia suffered in silence while he chased power. If you think this kind of toxic neglect is unforgivable, make sure you're subscribed. Comment, "Real men care to show you stand against this kind of behavior." She reached out with trembling fingers and touched his face, her thumb brushing away his tears. "But you're here now," she said softly. "That's something." Min-chan didn't return to Seoul. Not that night, not the next morning, not when his lieutenants called in a panic about territory disputes and power vacuums. He let every call go to voicemail, his phone eventually dying on the windowsill where he'd abandoned it. The hospice staff learned quickly not to question the tattooed man who'd taken up permanent residence in room 7. He paid them in cash enough to fund the entire facility for a year and asked only one thing in return: let him stay. He pulled a chair next to Amelia's bed and sat vigil like a soldier guarding the only thing left worth protecting. When she was strong enough, he wheeled her to the cliff's edge, where they watched the sun set over the East Sea, painting the sky in colors he'd never stopped to notice before. When the pain became too much, he held her hand while morphine dripped into her veins, counting her breaths like they were his last precious possessions. "Tell me about nursing school," he said one evening, desperate to fill the silence with anything but the machines monitoring her failing body. "You never talk about it." Amelia's eyes were closed, but a faint smile touched her lips. "I wanted to save people." "Funny, isn't it? I married a man who kills them. I'm sorry I made you give it up. You didn't make me. I chose you over everything else." She opened her eyes, looking at him with devastating clarity. "I just wish you'd chosen me back." The words cut deeper than any blade. Min-chan brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I'm choosing you now. The syndicate can burn. Let them fight over the scraps. I don't care anymore. Min-chan." Her voice was firm despite its weakness. "Promise me something. Anything. End it. The violence, the Dragon Syndicate, all of it. Promise me you'll walk away." He wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't that simple, that the underworld didn't let you retire, that leaving meant becoming prey. But when he looked into her eyes, those eyes that had loved him when he was nothing, that had waited 8 years for him to become human again, the arguments died. "I promise. Mean it. Don't just tell me what I want to hear. Actually leave that world behind. Build something that doesn't require blood to maintain." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "Do it for me. Let me die knowing you'll live." Min-chan pressed his forehead against their joined hands, his shoulders shaking. I'll dismantle it all. Every operation, every territory. I'll scatter the syndicate to the wind. Just please, his voice cracked, please don't leave me yet. I'm not leaving you, my dragon. I'm just going ahead. You'll catch up someday. Amelia's fingers brushed through his hair, the same gesture she'd used when they were young, and the world felt full of possibility instead of regret. But not for a long time. Promise me that too. I promise. Outside, Seoul was likely tearing itself apart without its dragon. Inside room 7, Minchan held his wife and learned what power actually meant. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to let go. Amelia passed away on a Tuesday evening as the sun melted into the East Sea, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold. Minchan held her hand as her breathing slowed, each exhale stretching longer than the last until finally, mercifully, there was only silence. No gunfire, no screaming, no violence, just peace. He sat with her body for 3 hours, memorizing the curve of her face, the way the fading light touched her hair. The hospice staff gave him space, understanding that some goodbyes required time that couldn't be measured in minutes. When he finally stood, Minchan kissed her forehead and whispered the words he should have said every single day. I love you. I'm sorry I made you wait so long to hear it. The funeral was small, just Minchan and a handful of nurses who'd cared for Amelia in her final days. No syndicate members, no displays of power. He buried her in a hillside cemetery overlooking the ocean, where wildflowers grew between the headstones and the air smelled like salt and freedom. The Dragon Syndicate collapsed within 6 months. Minchan didn't fight to save it. He dismantled it methodically, paying off debts, releasing men from their oaths, liquidating assets. The underworld whispered that he'd gone soft, that grief had broken him. They were half right. Grief hadn't broken him. It had finally made him whole. 3 years later, a man in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt knelt in a garden, his hands deep in rich soil. His tattoos had faded to shadows beneath sun-weathered skin. His scars no longer symbols of violence, but simply marks of a life lived. No designer suits, no guns, no blood money. The Amelia Reed Foundation occupied 5 acres of coastal property in Gangwon Province. The main building housed a hospice care facility where terminal patients received treatment regardless of their ability to pay. The gardens, Amelia's gardens, as Minchan called them, sprawled across the hillside in careful rows of medicinal herbs, flowering shrubs, and vegetables that fed both patients and staff. Minchan spent his days here now, tending to life instead of dealing in death. He planted roses where Amelia was buried, adding new varieties each season until her grave became a riot of color that could be seen from the hospice windows. Patients often found him there, talking to her headstone like she might answer back. The peonies are blooming early this year, he said, brushing soil from a budding plant. You'd love them, pink, like the dress you wore on our wedding day. A young nurse approached hesitantly. Mr. Park, the new patient in room 7 is asking for you. She wants to know about the gardens. Minchan smiled a real smile, the kind Amelia used to coax from him when they were young. Tell her I'll be right there. He stood slowly, his knees protesting after hours of kneeling, and cast one last look at Amelia's grave. The Dragon of Soul was dead, buried alongside the woman who'd loved him despite his monsters. In his place stood a gardener who'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that empires built on violence turn to ash, but love, even love discovered too late, could bloom eternal. CTA integration. Minchan learned his lesson the hard way. Don't let your ambitions cost you the people who love you. If you stand for love over money, hit subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. The gardens needed tending, and he had promises to keep.